So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the proposed horse carriage ban in New York City. It's a very widespread issue in the media, but I studied the public opinion on New York City's proposed horse-drawn carriage ban by surveying 2,000 New York City residents. So just to give you a little bit of background on the policy and timeline, in 2010, New York City Council passed Local Law 10, which gave strengthening towards carriage regulations. So it included larger stalls. It included having a mandatory 5-week vacation time for the horses, veterinary exams every 4 to 8 months, and the temperature restrictions. Then we go to August 2022 when a horse named Ryder collapsed. And this has been all over the media, and unfortunately that horse was later euthanized. So this kind of reignited a decade-long debate on whether or not horse carriages should be banned. In 2022, New York City Council introduced Ryder's law to phase out the industry by June 2026 and replace carriages with electric alternatives. So now we're going up to the summer. The debate intensified after there were some more incidents, and then the mayor of New York City decided that he was going to kind of reverse his long-held position, and he didn't really give any reasoning why to do this, and that he wanted to endorse the ban out of nowhere and sign an executive order. This led to the city council having their first actual vote, and this was in the health committee, so it wasn't a full council vote, on whether or not to advance the bill. And so 4 council members voted to not advance it, and 1 voted up to that, and then now we're at a place where we're going into a new administration. We're going to have, new council members, new committee members, and it's kind of reintroduced the debate, and we're going to see where that goes in 2026. So the key players in this are the Transport Workers Union Local 100, which represents New York City carriage drivers. There are about 170 drivers in New York City and 30 staff, and more than 90% of them are first-generation immigrants. And then NYC is the advocacy group that is against that wants to ban the horse carriages, and and some of the key people involved in this have background in real estate, and they also support the electric car replacement. So New York City Council's Health Committee has jurisdiction over this. The speaker controls what comes to vote, and Ryder's Law has 9+ co-sponsors. And what's at stake? So if Ryder's Law were to pass, 170 drivers and 30 stable workers and their families who depend on them will face an uncertain future. Right now, Ryder's Law has nothing in it that would give any job transition, and it would end any worker protection. So where are we now? So after the committee vote that was 4 against 1, the Transit Workers Union filed a lawsuit against NYC for $1 million plus in defamation, alleging malicious lies, misinformation about workers, and political transition. So now that we're going into a new mayoral administration, the mayoral-elect Zoran Mamdani, he says that he supports the ban but is in dialogue with TWU on worker transition, and it's possible that new council may introduce special legislation. So there are polls out there. There are 2 big polls out there that have been quoted in the media, and one was paid for through that class with the group, the advocacy group, and their results said that 78% of New York City's voters support ending the industry. TWU commissioned a poll recently of frequent park visitors in Central Park, and their results came out with 59% of respondents saying that they would support keeping the carriages. So the column here that I kind of wanted to solve was using maybe different samples, different framing, different questions to see how treatment effects could affect people's responses. And my approach is that I tested immigrant worker impact. So, knowing that if writer's law were to pass, we want to kind of see how people feel about immigrant workers being impacted by that and losing their livelihoods. And another thing is giving information to some people about how real estate special interests play a role in the 9-class advocacy. And then policy alternatives, so like seeing if those who learned about an independent medical veterinary oversight panel like being created, like would that be something that they would support instead of a ban? And then I also did one on combined framing of all those things. So the research question was how do exposures to different information frames affect New York City residents, support for proposed ban for strong carriages, and does introducing an independent equine medical oversight panel as a policy alternative change positive thinking? So the methodology, so sampled 2,000 New York City residents through professional online panels. This was fielded by Bradley Honan Strategies between 11/21/2025 and 11/26/2025. I was the one who designed the survey, but I wanted to make sure that we were using a reputable poster to field this. So if they wanted to use the results publicly, it would just be a lot more credible than coming from doing our own panels, especially like scholarships. So each up through the 5 experimental conditions, there were the control, which had a very minimal amount of information. It just said, there is a debate right now about legislation about to ban for strong heritage in New York City, and nothing more than that. Then the other framing, they all followed about the same amount of words and paragraphs, and just were getting for 400 people each. And this was also to make sure there was a pre-post opinion measurement. So out of the 2,000 people that were surveyed, the key demographics were that 32.6% of the respondents claimed from union households, 67.5% are pet owners, 88.1% were born in the United States, and in terms of prior awareness, 21% of people had a lot of prior awareness of this legislation, 42.8% had some, with 20.9% had a little bit, and only 14.6% had nothing at all. So I started off with a baseline pre-treatment question, just asking outright, would you support banning horse carriages? And the results from that were 55% 55% supported a ban, and 21.5% opposed a ban. Now, after being given these treatments, the condition significantly decreased support for the carriage ban. So with the control, we saw a 3.2 percentage point increase, and all treatments it was a 5 percent point support decrease. So opposition increased 10 to 12 percentage points across treatment conditions. Now, treatment effects by condition. So the control, as I explained, that was that increased by 3.2 percentage points. But the immigrant worker framing that we really wanted to look at, that gave us a swing of 5 percentage points. Real estate was close behind that, and so were the policy alternatives and the combined framing. So nothing was substantive enough to say that the immigrant worker framing that we really wanted to test made such a difference. Just kind of giving people information about what's going on seems to have more treatment effects. Now, we saw an increase in opposition to the ban. So immigrant workers was 12 percentage point, real estate was 10.5, and this is from pre to post treatment. Policy alternatives was 12.5, and we saw for the combined policies 11.8. So information mobilizes opposition. Treatment conditions produced 3 times greater opposition excuses compared to the control group. And the subgroup analysis, one of the key insights was that Democrats showed the largest treatment responsiveness, particularly to the immigrant worker framing. And that was 11-point swing. Looking at a subgroup analysis of key constituencies, So Manhattan residents were most responsive to immigrant worker frames. Union households respond to policy alternatives. Pet owners are persuadable, which I found significant. Yes. Okay. And low awareness voters are key targets if we're looking to do persuasion. So now the results show policy preferences. So 80% prefer worker protection over compromising options, and only 10% of people supported the ban outright after they went through the treatments. So one of the biggest things that we really wanted to study, other than the immigrant frameworking, was the support for independent oversight. And we asked, what would you consider supporting the carriage industry with independent veterinary oversight as a viable policy alternative to a ban, because it would address animal welfare and at the same time preserve jobs? So 76.2% of the respondents said that they should consider. And I also asked questions about to get kind of a feel on, are there solutions that could protect both animals and workers? Would you be in support of this? That had 85.4% support, and that 82.7% said that both priorities should be addressed. 79.5% said independent vets should assess welfare instead of leaving it up to politicians. And 75.3% of the respondents thought that eliminating jobs without support is unfair. So this gives a clear path forward. Knowing that 76% would consider supporting carriages with independent veterinary oversight, this is something that I believe that TWU could use to leverage with City Council, and having this type of support and having 2,000 people that were polled versus that are New York City residents, versus in their previous poll they had talked to people who have been in Central Park. So New York City residents are people who are going to vote, and that's something that's going to matter more to these politicians. And then other finding is that information is the strategy, and that facts are on the side. Sometimes it feels like a very one-sided issue. You're either very against it or you're very for it, and there's not a lot of discussion or a lot of talk about what's really going on. I would say that a lot of people who support the ban probably do not know about Local Law 10 and all the different veterinary and all the different things that were added to make sure that there were animal protections. And this showed that this is not an animal versus workers issue. 85% of New Yorkers believe you could protect both the horses and the workers. And my strategic recommendations would be to lead with workers. Central immigrant families, 200 jobs, 55, 75,000 a year in wages. They're going to have transition support in writer's law, and this frame produces the largest effects. And another way would be to reframe the debate, so not an animal versus workers, but having both solutions and putting things together so that we could find alternatives that would that would ensure animal safety, and it would also ensure that these workers and others